Welcome back to the Leadership Locker. This is Rich Cardona. This is a throwback to when I interviewed Lindsay McGregor, who her and her partner Neel have a business called the Vega Factor in New York City, in which they help companies transform their work cultures. The thing is, everyone does that, right? I mean, it's not super exciting. There's plenty of people telling you how you could do this, how you can improve morale, all these different things. But they use a science called total motivation, and Lindsay walks through it. And when you listen to her, everything she says is just wildly believable, and it's because she's tested it and they've tested it. They both have backgrounds with McKinsey, and they both just want people to understand what is going to be the driver in order for them to be primed to perform at work. But more importantly, as an entrepreneur like me, this is so we can get a good feel of how we can help ensure that we are providing an environment that's conducive to the success of the people who are joining our teams, whether they're contractors, part-time or full-time employees. That's what we want. So please enjoy this podcast very much. It is sponsored by Rich Cardona Media, where we make sure that you are able to realize your value through the visibility of video content, specifically on LinkedIn, where we just crush it for our clients. And we do so by filming, editing, and distributing the content for them because they don't have time. I don't have time. Please enjoy the episode. Subscribe if you want some awesome business advice from some of the top people out there. Tons of great guests on the podcast. Subscribe, review it, rate it, and enjoy this episode. Please tell everyone who you are and where we are and what it is that you do.
Yeah, so my name's Lindsay McGregor. I'm the author of Prime to Perform and a co-founder and CEO of Vega Factor, which is an organization that helps bring the cutting edge of psychology to organizations. How do you build the highest levels of performance? How do you build a business case around a great operating model and culture that inspires people to do their best work?
So Forrest and I were talking, and he says that you are a perfect blend of EQ and IQ. And then when he talked about so someone like me looks at EQ as very important. I look at leadership involves a certain amount of having skin in the game with your people, understanding them, knowing about their families, knowing what makes them tick. But there also is a scientific side to it, which you explored, which is very counterintuitive to people like me. I would be like kind of avoiding it, like, oh no, data and all this other stuff. So what gave you the idea? How did that even happen where you kind of merged the two? Because that is certainly a model that I haven't seen, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I'd always cared deeply about the people that I worked with. But one of my first projects in the workforce was to figure out, how do you take a group of hundreds of people and make them really high performing? And could you measure that on purpose? And you would walk into these giant call centers that had hundreds of people looking like robots, and it was completely soul destroying. Yeah. And you knew that the answer in that with hundreds of people wasn't the same as if you're talking just to your best friend, right? You couldn't just take everybody out to pizza and ask them about their hopes and dreams.
Exactly. I just have to say that because I'm like, how many times can we buy them lunch?
Yeah.
Like, it's not enough.
Exactly. The motivational posters are definitely not going to work, right? So what do you do at this scale? Because every leader that I met individually at that company was interpersonally nice, but at the scale of hundreds of people, it fell apart. And it felt a little bit like if you had two circles, one being nice and one being impactful, it was very hard for leaders to figure out where do you get the overlap? Can you actually do that? And so we started testing a lot of different theories from psychology to understand what creates high levels of performance and high levels of motivation. And found that there was one approach that really, really worked. And it all came down to understanding that why people work determines how well they work. Yeah. So their reason for doing something is going to shape what they do. Yes. And there's this really interesting spectrum of motives that is the first place I now ever start with a team or with an entire organization, understanding what whys is their organization driving. And if you alter those whys, you can alter their business performance.
So I've done this. I've had 500 associates at a point, and during peak season, and there was a couple times where we just outperformed the network completely. And I was asked to write something about it, what are the systems? What are the processes? I'm like, nothing. Like, I talk to them. I talk to them about how important this is, that, you know, maybe they're going to be in hour 8 of doing this out of hour 10, but that package might be an order from one of their cousins or something like that. The other thing I think is that teaching people about the business, so they're not a robot and just coming in to do the same thing, you know, kind of giving them the why is really important. Now, you mentioned the challenge of trying to have the impact on so many people, like, still, what is the foundational piece where you could get everyone on board? Because everyone's motives across that whole spectrum of people are going to be very different. So how do you kind of collaborate it or just collect it to where you have one unique kind of North Star?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you were intuitively pulling on what motivates people. There's a spectrum of reasons why people work. And it ranges from when you work because you care about the work itself to you're working for reasons that are completely disconnected from the work. So we'll combine that into the motive spectrum. So the most powerful motive is called play. And it's when you're working simply because you care about the work itself. You're finding enjoyment and engagement. So when you're saying that you didn't want to treat people like robots, you wanted to help them understand the business, my guess is you were really encouraging play by helping them experiment. Like, what could I do differently? If I did something this way, would it work faster? Oh, that's interesting. That's not working. How do I change it? You're creating real engagement for the activity that they're doing day to day. The second motive is purpose. And this is when you care about the impact of your work. And what most organizations get wrong is they have the grand mission statement up on the wall, but most people feel like, you know, if I don't show up today, nobody's going to care, right?
I'm easily replaceable.
Exactly.
Especially if it's a thriving company.
Exactly. And so purpose is, how do you make each person feel like each hour they're at work matters? And when you were giving them the analogy of, imagine this package is going to your cousin, right? That's something that really makes you feel like you're doing something for another human being, like you matter.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a few more. I'd love to share them. There's play, there's purpose, there's potential, which is when you're working for some second order outcome of the work. Like usually the job is a good stepping stone. So maybe this job, you want to be a team leader one day, and you know this job is going to train you to get there. Play, purpose, potential all increase great adaptive performance and motivation. But there's a set of motives why people that actually decrease performance that we use a lot in organizations and in our personal lives. So the first is when you're using emotional pressure. So I don't know if you've ever tried to guilt a loved one into doing something. Never, right? But this is using guilt, shame, FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, peer pressure to get somebody to do something. The next along the spectrum is economic pressure. And this is when you're trying to force somebody to do something through a stick or a carrot, saying you must do this for the reward or to avoid the punishment. And finally is inertia. And this is when you ask somebody, you know, why are you doing that? And they say, I have no idea. I've just been doing this over and over and over again. I can't explain it to you. And you can measure, you know, how much play, purpose, potential people feel, how much emotional pressure, economic pressure, and inertia they feel. And these motives are so consistent around the world, you can boil them down into a single concept, which we call total motivation, or TOMO for short. And when you have a high TOMO team, people not only can feel the energy and the passion and the motivation, but it also, you can change the TOMO of a team and impact numbers like sales or customer experience, and create a real business case around it. That means that a company doesn't have to make this decision because it's the moral thing to do, or it's the good thing to do for your people. They can actually say, this is worth the investment. It's going to make us more, it's going to make us a stronger company, and I can show you the sales numbers and the customer experience numbers as a result.
But when the company puts pressure on senior leaders to make this quarter needs to be, we need plus this percent. We have productivity. We want to be number one in the network. Or, you know, obviously you're always looking at your competition. When leaders adopt an economic or numbers-based perspective, how can they temper that to go for it, but without sending the pressure down because it goes in waves, and you will actually probably ruin your chances of hitting your goals. Yeah. So what's your take on that?
It's a great question, and something a lot of leaders struggle with. And my guess is your experience in the military, you have a lot of examples of this, where you have incredibly high stakes, right? You literally have lives on the line. You have to hit certain outcomes. You have to deliver on those outcomes. And the way that you can interpret that as a team is in two different ways. One is you can interpret that as economic pressure. Your leader can say, you must hit this, otherwise we're going to be punished, we're going to be ashamed, no excuses. You can use it in a very aggressive way, or you can use it in a super high purpose way. If we accomplish these goals, then we're going to be doing what's right for our customers. We're going to be living up to our best selves. We're going to be reaching our true potential. And so there's nothing about Tomo that means that you shouldn't have really high and aggressive aspirations. It just means it's really important to think through why you're striving for those aspirations and to make sure you're communicating that in a way that's really going to inspire people. So, for example, we worked with a bunch of retail stores where we took 4 stores and transformed the motives of the associates in those stores. And one of the things that we changed was their weekly sales calls. So in the way they used to do the sales calls is they'd pull open their report and the leader would say, why are you worse than your neighboring store on this one? What's wrong with this one? What's wrong with this one? Right? And it was just shame. Everybody hated it. You felt so bad. It was awful. And the way we shifted the call was around play, purpose, and potential. So play was, we know that the big aspirations we have are to improve the health of everybody in our community, to increase our efficiency so that we can reduce costs, and to do something else. They had a couple of those. And then went through the data and said, what can we learn from the data last week? And what experiments do we want to run next week to improve what's most important to us? So it shifted from shame and blame to learning and purpose. And it was subtle. It was in the language and the conversations and the outcomes. It makes a huge difference to the amount of stress that you feel when you're approaching something like that. And it made every single associate a true owner of their results. They now cared about it, as opposed to, the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want to get yelled at by Rich on Monday.
Completely. The experimental part, that leads me to another really important question before we switch gears, and that is, you evaluate the data, you look at everything collectively, and you say to yourself, okay, this is now a pattern, we need to do something. In my experience, I see a lot of knee-jerk reactions, like, we need to do this now. And I mean, it was very normal for senior leaders to come out of a meeting and then they'd all go to their respective managers and be like, this is what we're doing. There wasn't a why behind it. I could feel the stress behind it and everything else. When it comes to experimenting with potential solutions, why do you think the knee-jerk reaction is followed by another knee-jerk reaction, meaning, this isn't working, I expected a fix in 2 days. Like, you can't go to the gym if you don't have a six-pack and work out and go look in the mirror when you get home and be like, where is it? But I feel like we jump and jump and jump and jump. What is your guidance for experimenting and how long it should take and how long you need to reevaluate your ideas to fix it?
Well, in this situation, these retail stores within just around 8 months were able to have about triple the profitability and triple the customer service numbers and triple the cross sales of a set of similar stores. And so that was in a very short amount of time. The organization started to think about play and purpose and potential because they thought it was a nice thing to do or would help their recruiting, right? And they kind of believed us that it would increase their results, but they didn't really believe us, right? And then after 8 months, they realized that this was the most profitable initiative they had ever invested in, right? So, but you're right. That was 8 months, but it's not, you can change something in one day for a team. But what we find is with experimentation, a lot of the experiments that organizations come up with are like big projects that will take tons of time and a brand new team, and it's got a 1,000-point checklist, and they bake these huge plans. And the way we find that experimentation really boosts performance is to start them really, really small.
Yep.
Say, like, what's the thing you can do differently on the floor today? Yep. What's the different question you can ask the customer? It's creating a learning goal, like test 3 new ways to welcome a customer into this store, and share those experiments with each other. So at the heart of it, what we find is that Tomo really increases adaptive performance, which is every single individual feels like they're learning something new.
Yes.
And then every individual is scaling that to the rest of the organization once they learn it.
How do you encourage them to have the patience, not just in you, but in the process, so they're actually bought in, not for the quick fix?
When we teach people about Tomo and its impact on performance, we almost always teach it in ways that they can personally connect to in their personal lives. Nice. So we ask people to take these concepts and experiment with them, like tonight over dinner. Like, go home to the CFO of a big organization said to us that she went home after learning about Tomo. She's the CFO of a bank, and was having dinner with her daughter. And her daughter asked her, said, "Why are you going on this business trip tomorrow, Mom? Like, I really wish you weren't going on this trip." Oh, man. And her normal response would have been sort of anger. Like, how else do you think you get food on this table, right? Like, I do this for you. And she took a deep breath, and she thought about what's the play and purpose for this reason. And she explained to her daughter that, one, she actually really enjoyed her job, and it did a lot of good for people in the world to help them give access so that they could build homes, afford the schools they wanted to go to, and build the lives that they wanted to live. And it created this completely different conversation with her daughter about what they believe in and what their morals are and what their values are. And she could just feel the huge difference in that moment. We had another head of operations who actually did a similar experiment with his son, where he realized that the entire way he was trying to get his kids to get good grades was through sticks and carrots. And within just a couple months of changing, of changing how he talked about the grades with his kid, suddenly his teenager, who completely stonewalled him, was being really open about his learning journey and what he was finding at school and what he was struggling with. So I would say, like, try experimenting with how you're convincing your significant other to go to brunch with you and your friends this weekend, and you'll start to see the results. The people making things happen and why you even are doing what you're doing. So if I remember correctly, at the beginning, you said you were in a position where you had to try and influence a lot of people. Where was that? And then how did things start changing in your head as far as the approach? So we were in a big call center, and we were starting a new media business. It was supposed to be really interesting and exciting. We were going to help. We were going to help. We were going to help small businesses access the internet, and it was going to be amazing. And within a couple of months, a huge portion of the sales force had quit. And we realized we had put into place all of these super high pressure systems to, call monitoring, sitting next. We were essentially the evil guys in Office Space, and creating so much stress and fear because we thought it would get performance faster, but it had the complete opposite of effect of what we wanted. And I'm going to interrupt a lot on this portion, but you say we. Like, you too? Tell me some of your behaviors that you look back and you're like, God, like, what was I doing? So, even just, one of my jobs was to look at the reports every week. And so the way that we would read out the reports would be, we were supposed to get 10 sales and we got 2. What's wrong? Try harder. As opposed to building this really fun collaborative problem-solving process of, wow, this is interesting. Like, we expected 10, we got 2. Like, let's dig in. What experiments could we run? What could we do differently? What do we think is happening? Let's problem solve together. Let me be a support and a coach, as opposed to just the person that's waving bad news in your face. And when, so to me, it felt like I was not able. That sure, I could be a nice person during coffee or over lunch, but at scale it wasn't working. It was even the same thing with smaller teams. Like if I was leading, there was a 5-person team that I led, and I would walk in on Monday morning and ask people, how was your weekend? And be all nice, and we'd have a fun conversation. And then I'd say, call me if you need help. Because what I thought people wanted was tons of autonomy.
Yes.
Like lots of space. And of course, if there's an emergency, I'll help out, but otherwise, be on your own. And when we measured the motives of people who have really hands-off leaders like that, it's almost as bad as people who have leaders that yell at them.
Yep.
Because you actually feel like this person isn't investing in. Your play isn't going up because you're not learning. Your purpose isn't going up because they're not helping you see the impact of your work. Your potential isn't going up because you don't feel like you're advancing in what you can do. And so it was I knew enough not to be toxic. Everybody would have left that project and said, yeah, we were a nice group, we're all friends, but did we do the best work of our lives? No. Like, did I feel like that was one of the most incredible work experiences I've ever had? No. And that's what I wanted to figure out how to do.
So I resonate with what you said, because people want to be led. Like there's a very fine line between being hands-off and being perceived as completely disinterested, like just like in the Marine Corps, we always used to say, just shut up and color, just do what you're here to do, be on time, don't be late, and everything will be okay. But that resonates with me a lot. So when you were able to kind of be a little bit more self-aware, how did you decide, this is what I'm gonna do, this is how I'm gonna do it, and how scared were you?
Good question. So once we had really I remember sitting down on a Saturday night with my co-author Neel, who's also my husband, and going through all of the data around. We had gotten back this data set of total motivation in 50 major companies around the world.
How did you even get that? So tell me how you reached out to companies like, hey, can you do this thing? I'm trying to do this thing, and I need you to do this so I could do more. How did you even do that?
It was a market research project. So we hired a market research firm to go walk around. They walk around parking lots and shopping malls and interview people about where they work and why they work. And we got all this data back, and we were putting it, we're analyzing it all, and we were looking at some of the relationships between why people came to work and customer satisfaction, and we were getting just these straight line correlations, and it was jaw-dropping. We had to do it 3 times over to make sure that we weren't doing it wrong, and then we started doing our first experiments in stores to see if we could actually cause the difference on purpose, if we could actually change somebody's motives. And once we had cracked the code, I was like, oh, this is so amazing. I have to share this knowledge. So I wrote a 3-page article about all the research and submitted it to the Harvard Business Review. And they're like, it's not really very good. So what? And so I was like, well, if they don't like my 3-page article, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a 300-page book. Very logical, right?
Yeah. I want to stop right there. Tell me, so you looked at that problem as it not being accepted as, well, I'll show you, or I'm going to do this. But that's not normal. A lot of people would be like, I had this amazing data. I thought I just, created the next big thing, and I got shut down. Especially when you're submitting something to HBR. How did you, or what advice would you give to people who do what you did and do not immediately think like, I'm not going to stop, that means I got to do this? Like, how did you have your composure to continue to drive on?
I've learned, I think at that point I'd learned there's a huge difference between what the knowledge is and how you communicate it. And so my assumption was we just hadn't communicated it properly enough yet. And I think one of the pieces that probably isn't obvious in writing the book is that in the process of writing it, you're trying to explain your thinking and your theory hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times to people that you're interviewing, to test audiences, to test readers. And so there's for every page in the book, there's like 5 versions of it in the trash can. It's how do you explain this in a way that's going to really resonate with people and feel so intuitive, but at the same time really new and different. And so to me, it was a challenge of, we know that the data is incredible. But let's just go through lots of iterations until I can actually speak in a way that's worthy of that data.
Yeah. So you decided to write the book, and tell me how that was. So from an article to a book is a completely different undertaking, obviously. And how long did it take you to get from, talking to a publisher to having the idea to finishing? Like, walk me through writing a book, because everyone wants to write a book. Everyone's like, I'm going to write a book one day. But like, you've done it, so what's it like?
So I thought it was going to take 3 months, and it took 2 years. I think being naive was a blessing. And it's a really long process. You don't realize that as you put together a nonfiction book, you're really not only just proving, can you write something entertaining, but you have to really think about, is there a market out there for it, and write the business case for it. And in those, if I was going to start again, what I would actually do is say, all of it should have been blog posts, right? Just get much more user feedback and much more testing along the way, and then at the end, collate that into your book. But start with a much more frequent way of interacting with people, whether that's your blog posts or videos like this or things like that.
So when you decided to write a book, and you had your co-author, which is your husband, number one, well, with the book and the business, how is that dynamic? There's so many opinions on family and business. There's probably much stronger opinions on husband and wife business, type of thing. How is that for you? Is it, I mean, you clearly complement each other, but is there parts where you're just like, like, forget it. This is not working.
It's been really amazing and pretty incredible, in a good way, fortunately. And I think it's a couple of things. One, when you're founding a business together, you're always looking for a business partner that's got similar values to you do. And so that is a really fundamental first piece that's actually really helpful. The second is that we both were trained really deeply in a process of solving problems together from our former consulting firm where we both worked. And what that had done was it completely depersonalized changing somebody's work. It taught us a very collaborative problem-solving process of, for example, even in writing the book, like I would write one draft of a chapter, he'd take it, completely change it, I'd take it back, completely change it again. Where you feel like what you're doing together is molding wet clay, rather than criticizing each other's work or taking it personally. And when there's a very clear process that everything starts as a really rough draft, then it goes into a little bit tighter, a little tighter. You just follow your problem-solving process together rather than take it personally.
Problem solving sticks out in my head as just the best business practice. Like, can I solve problems? Can I be creative and innovative about it? What are some fundamental problem-solving skills that you feel like people maybe overlook that could probably change their turnaround time, as far as fixing something?
It actually goes back to one of the core frameworks in Prime to Perform in the book, which is we think about any high performer has both tactical performance and adaptive performance. So tactical performance is your ability to stick to the plan. Do you have a strategy? Do you have a work plan with milestones? Do you have a personal to-do list? And adaptive performance is your ability to diverge from that plan. So when things go wrong or unexpected, can you pivot? Can you be creative, innovative, learn new things? My favorite way of thinking about tactical and adaptive is tactical is how well we've learned from the past. Have you taken all of your past learnings and codified them so that you never make the same mistake twice? And adaptive performance is how well you're learning for the future. Are you continually inventing? And so in problem solving, a lot of what we have to define when we're working with our teams, with our clients, is where do you need the tactical and where do you need the adaptive? where are we all going to follow the plan, the process, the way it's been codified? And where is it actually okay to play, experiment, adapt? And it really changes how you understand thinking about your priorities as a team. And there's tons of problem-solving tools beneath that, but that's been one of the most valuable personal lessons and leadership lessons, is that because these two things are opposite, the more tactical you have, the more you kill adaptive, and vice versa. Your job as a leader is to keep those two in balance and constantly be thinking, where do I need one versus where do I need the other?
All right, and that is a wrap. Please let me know your thoughts on total motivation and the various different lanes she went down that can enhance not only the people who perform for us, but our performance for them, which to me is much more important. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the Leadership Locker, please do so and connect with me. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Rich Cardona, video strategist. It's awesome to just meet people there, network with people, and just look for opportunities. Take care. See you next week.